let's revisit the Hello World program, aka the Hello Spencer program, for a minute. Now the problem is I got hasty and I deleted it, so I have to create it again. So that might be not a bad thing to review here. So again, to create this program, public class, my first program. Public class is the direct declaration of what it is. The my first program is the identifier that I'm giving it. It's the name that I'm giving it. And then I'll say this is where my first program begins, and down here is where my first program ends. Okay? And then I'm going to indent, because now this is part of it's part of this class, and so then I'll put this line that indicates that this is the main method, this is where we're going to begin. So again, that line is public static void main string args. Okay? And then I'll put an opening brace to say this is where the main method begins, and a closing brace to say this is where the main method ends. Okay, so this now is the main method, and the main method is inside the class, and I can see that visually because I've indented to show that, yes, this is part of it. Now I'm indenting again to do this line that I'm going to print out, system.out.println. Okay, and then hello world is what we had in there. And a semicolon to end the statement saying, this is the end of that statement, go ahead and execute it. Now, I've just wasted 2 minutes of your life because we already had this done, but I had to go through and do it again. So anyway, I'm going to save it, and remember that I need to save it as the same name as I name my program. So my first program, myfirstprogram.java. That's the name of the file I'm giving it. Now what I'm going to do here is going to jump to a very advanced level of programming and then jump right back. I mean, it's really not that advanced, but we're going to kind of jump concepts and then we're going to come back. And this is like when you're on Google Maps or something like that, and you scroll in really fast. When you use the little scroll bar on your mouse and you accidentally do it out too far, scroll down too far, scroll in, and it jumps way forward or way back. This is kind of what we're going to do, because I want to show you that we can have multiple methods in a program. And so I'm going to write a second method in this program, and I'm going to call it public static void, and I'm going to give it a name, print something, opening closing parenthesis, and then an opening closing brace. Okay, so again, don't worry about the syntax specifically. I just kind of want to give you an overview of how this might work. I can actually take this code, cut it, and paste it down into this method instead, and then call that method, print something. Okay, opening closing parenthesis. Now again, I know I'm just typing away here, and you're saying, whoa, wait a second. What are we doing? What we are doing is I've created a second method like the first one, except for instead of calling it main, which is means something to Java, I've called it my own name. I've called it print something. And then here I'm calling my own method that I just created, and that's going to be the one that prints out the hello world. All right, so let's compile this. Luckily no errors, and then I'm going to run this, and we still get our printout of the hello world. Okay, so are we feeling okay about that? If you're not, rewind it just a little bit, come back and look at that again. Okay, all we've done is, instead of printing out something inside the main method itself, we've created a second method, and then we are calling that method, and that method is in turn printing out the message that I wanted to be printed in the first place. Okay, so I've separated those items out. All right. Now what I'm going to do is jump even one step further. So let me go back to the way it was. A lot of Control-Zing here, or yeah, Control-Zing. So we've got our main method. I can also accomplish the same task by creating a separate class. So I'm going to create another Java program, and I'll call this public class another Java, I guess I probably ought to say class, another Java class. And this method now is going to have a method inside of it called public. Now I'm going to lose the static keyword, and we'll talk more about that when it's used and why it's used and that in later discussions. But that word's going to go away. So public void, and then I'll call this one print something. Okay. Opening, closing parenthesis, opening brace to say this is what this program, this is where the print something method begins, and this brace indicates where the print something method ends. Okay, and then I'm going to do that same message, system.out.println hello world, in this method instead. Now notice this is in a completely different class. Okay, now I'm going to save this. Again, I need to save it as the same name I named it here, and it defaults to that, and I need to save it in the same folder as my previous file in order for this to work. And I'm doing that, so I'll save it there. Then I'll come back over to this method, and and not printing over here. Instead, what I'll do is I'll say, you know, I just created that other another Java class. So what I'm going to do is create, I'm going to use that class. Okay, and so the way that I use it is to call it by name, another Java class, and then give it a name. So I'll just call it X for now, just for lack of a better name, and set it equal to another Java class and then opening, closing parenthesis, and then a semicolon. Okay. I'm questioning my decision to jump this far ahead, but I want you to have this overview. Okay, so all I've done here is I've said, we call this creating an instance of that class. I've said another Java class is referring to this class that I've created. I want one of those, and I'm going to call it X. So go build me one out in memory, and then I'm just going to call it X from now on. And then this, so this is giving it a name, and then this is actually instantiating it and say, now go actually and do it and build me an instance of that class. And we'll see why that's nice to have those two parts separated out in future programs. But for now, I just want to show you that I can say, go out to that X class that I just created and print something. Okay? Alright, so hopefully you followed me all through this. So we've come over here, we've got our class that we've created, another Java class. We have our print something method that its whole job in life is to print something. And what's printing is hello world. I'm going to compile this program. Now notice if I try and run this program, it's going to tell me there's no main methods, applets, or midlets found in the file. And that's true, there isn't. This class does not have a main method because it's not the driver class, if you remember back to what we talked about in one of the previous lectures. If I come back to now my first program class, though, it does have a main method. And so I can compile and run this, and it prints out hello world. Well, how is it doing that? Well, I've created an instance of this class, and I'm saying go out to that class and call the print something method that's in that class. So it jumps over here and it calls this method, which tells it to print something. Okay, now why did I do that? Now let's come back all the way back to where the beginning, where we were. Okay, unravel all of that. The point I'm trying to prove there is when we talked about in the previous one of the previous lectures, this idea that we have a program is made up of many classes. Many as in M-A-N-Y. I said it like mini, but many classes. We can have many classes, and each of those classes might have many methods, and that's kind of what we've got in this situation. We have a second class. So now our program consists of two classes. We have our My First Program class, which has suddenly become very advanced, and another Java class file. Each of those classes has a method in it. My First Program has a main method. Another Java class has a print something method. These classes working together form a program. They are working together to accomplish the task. And so the only reason I kind of jump around before we move into the next part is I want you to understand that principle, that there are many, generally speaking, sometimes and actually your first programs will probably only have one class and maybe just one method, I don't know. We need at least one of each, but we can have many of each, and they function together to make a program. Back, when I was a kid, we watched the program Voltron, and I know there's been some different versions of that now, but in Voltron there were these individuals that would people, I don't even know, were they aliens or something? I don't know. I'm probably offending some people here. That they would come together to form one big machine. They would take all their individual machines, they'd come together, and it'd be one big robot-looking thing that would then fight. They could all fight together. Did the Power Rangers do the same thing? I don't know. Anyway, the point is that's what we're doing. We build these individual classes, and the classes come together to form one big program that's going to accomplish all the tasks. So I just wanted to step back, take a look at the big picture, and now we'll go back and continue on looking at how a program or individual concepts of programs. All right? Okay. Spencer out.